Good morning, television friends and neighbors. Just today I wanted to talk a little bit about a topic that came up over the weekend. I was talking to some people, and we were kind of talking about a conversation that we'd had in the past. We were talking about an interesting book I was reading, and one of my friends said, hey, it came up that I was still reading this book. It's called Real-Time Relationships. I'm listening to the audiobook in gaps in my time. But anyway, I was talking to them, and they said, well, this book is really, it sprang up from, the author was doing a lot of podcasts at the time on the same subject material, and there's really a lot of great information in those podcasts. And so essentially, like, you say you care a lot about the information in the book, which that's why I'm reading the book. I'm trying to find out if I care a lot about the information in it, and so far I've been really interested in what I've heard, which I think in a good book you're gonna, even if it's not necessarily the money shot that the author is really going for in the end, they tend to make things interesting along the way. And so I would categorize this book as that. I don't really feel like we've gotten to the point as far as like a how-to manual or something, but I think it's been interesting reading, and so that's why I've enjoyed listening to it. And I've also had a lot of discussions about some of the concepts that we've encountered so far in the book. So I think I think when I read a book, I like to encounter new perspectives and ideas, different ways of looking at things. And then I also want to be able to talk with some other people who've also read the book and share thoughts and compare notes and stuff like that on it. So from my perspective, I'm getting what I was looking for out of the book, and so I wanted to continue to read it. But then this friend was, it seemed kind of irritated that I say that I want to learn what's in the book, but even though I do trust this person a great deal with their insights and their general experience in the world, and oftentimes I'll go and I'll talk with this person directly and ask, I'll mention issues where I was frustrated with discussions that they had access to, and I'll say, hey, can you look at this and let me know what you think about it? And then they'll be honest with me, and that's one of the things I appreciate. It's like, wow, gee, Mark, you're a real jerk here, or yeah, so and so is has difficulty with these concepts and has trouble accepting challenges to their position or whatever. They could go either way, or other ways. And so that's why it's really interesting and valuable for me to talk to this person. So I do value their input and everything, but I also have this other influence, in addition to just the sheer fact that I enjoy the book that I'm reading and didn't really want to stop in the middle of everything, is that first of all, I was watching Cosmos a couple years ago. I was rewatching it because obviously it's a show almost as old as I am. I was watching like an updated version of it that was done by the original creators or something like that. So it was supposed to be true to life, and it was before Neil deGrasse Tyson made his version, which I watched a couple episodes of, but I thought it was a little more science-y than scientific. I thought Carl Sagan did a better job, but I would like to catch up and watch some of the episodes I missed and provide maybe some more specific critique down the road, because I do enjoy just the general topic of Cosmos. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is he's pretty well known as a scientist, but also as a media figure, so I'd like to kind of look and see if he's doing the Bill Nye thing at all, kind of pandering to his audience, or if he's really sticking to the science. So anyway, so on the subject of this material, so I was listening to Carl Sagan, and he was talking about the library of Alexandria in Egypt or something. Or maybe, I think it was later on he was in the New York Public Library, and that's where the scene actually happened, I think. I haven't actually been there, so that's why I'm trying to tell the difference between the two locales. But he took like a walk of, he walked maybe like 5 shelves worth, and he did the math. He's like, you know, if it takes you this much time to read the average book and you live this long, you know, you can read, you know, X number of books in your lifetime. It wasn't a lot. And then you are, you know, then he like took a couple steps down the shelves, and it was like 3 steps. It was like he went like 3 or 4 shelves, and he's like, you'd be able to read every book from here over to here. And he's in this like gigantic library, and it just gives you an idea of like the immensity of information that humans have put down. And I think with modern technology, people are able to put down even more. I mean, here I am vlogging, like, you know, 30, 40, 50 minutes depending on my commute length, and you know, I'm creating that content on a regular basis, and it's shittier than like what you might see from like a TV show or something, but the people who watch it seem to be interested by the topics I bring up and the ways that I communicate about them, to at least some extent. So so it's interesting that we like, and even some of them have started vlogging and stuff like that. So it's like this thing that's spreading. We're generating more and more content, and we have less and less. And that's actually kind of one of the reasons that I wanted to start a vlog, is this whole concept of, you know, we only have so much time to find all the interesting information. So what we really need are aggregators. And so it's really important that when you have useful information, that, like, I find when I was campaigning and stuff like that, I'd always have people come up to me and they would say, have you read such and such book? And I was like, well, no, I haven't even seen Forrest Gump, so, you know, there's a lot of content that I haven't seen. And then their attitude was, well, if you haven't read this particular book, then you can't possibly speak on this subject, and that explains why you're so clueless on it. And once you read the book, you will have exactly the same revelations about the subject matter that I have had, that I'm so enlightened. And you know, it's just this kind of thing that it really rubs me the wrong way, and I really try hard to avoid it, which is weird because a lot of these free domain radio free books and stuff that have given me a lot to think about, a lot of times I'll recommend to people to read them, but then I also try to come and show and expose them to like key segments that I think are especially pertinent, especially if they ask for details like, oh, is there some part of that you thought was exceptionally relevant to what we're talking about? So, you know, I think we kind of owe it to people to kind of provide a Cliff's Notes, and also it shows that we understand a subject ourselves. You know, I think that I would be a huge failure if I were reading these books and people were coming up, and then I was telling people about content from them, and then they were asking questions, and I just like stared at them blankly and said, well, you're just gonna have to read the book because I can't possibly explain it to you. And this is something that I see in the technical space a lot as well. You know, here I work with some of the brightest people that I've ever worked with, and they're very technical people. They're able to achieve all kinds of great things with technology, and yeah, if I ask them a very simple question, then they almost never just answer my question. And part of this comes from unique views of like how to be a good teacher. Like, you know, I agree that you learn more from doing than from just listening to someone lecture, but honestly I don't learn very well from lectures anyway. So if I'm asking a question of a lecturer or a expert in a subject matter, I'm asking them because I want to go use that information to go and practice it. So not answering that question that I've identified as a gap, all that means is now I have to spend like many times more time to go and figure out that information myself. I think a little bit of the attitude is hazing as well. Why should I make it easy for this other guy who fundamentally is competing with me in the workplace? Why should I just give him softball stuff when it took me years to learn this information? And that's not an approach I take, because most of the stuff that I've learned, first of all, the technology changes so fast. It's not in what you know, it's what you can learn. And so, it doesn't matter if it took me 15 years to learn some technique or whatever. If I know some process or approach, I'm going to just share it. And oftentimes, just working on a team where other people know the same techniques and approaches and are on the same page with you, that really is going to help you work more productively, because you're all speaking the same language. You're all kind of working with the same philosophy in mind of how to use the tools. And it'd just be ridiculous if you said, oh, I need to write a program that does such and such, and then they just said, oh, just use Visual Studio. I mean, Visual Studio is like immensely complicated. It's astounding how much stuff is built in, and I don't feel that you could ever quote learn it and then go use it. I think you just have to start learning it and get into it. The same thing with software like OneNote or most of the programs in the Office suite. And so anyway, back to this conversation I had. It's like I feel like there's this amorphous blob of podcasts, and another friend had actually put a bunch of them together, and each one is like 2 hours long. But I mean, I've started listening to some of them, and so far I'm trying to, I don't have my system for listening to these podcasts exactly the way I want it. I mean, I haven't really downloaded them all because I don't really need to have them offline, but I was trying to listen via the streaming app, and it kind of sucks, and the audio stopped at a couple of different times, and I had to go jump around with an imprecise slider to get back to roughly where I was. So I ended up listening to, it's just like a frustrating experience to listen to the podcasts in general. And when I listen to them, I generally like to listen to them. Actually, I really like listening to them on my podcast app, but that's better for current issues than it is for old stuff, in my experience. So anyway, I'm trying to figure out this, a good process for it at the same time, but I'm a little frustrated just by the whole process of listening to podcasts versus the audiobook. And the audiobook isn't perfect either, because I need to actually find some audio software and break it up. It's like a 9-hour long MP3 file, and it's like, come on, I'd like chapters, and then I can just go and zip in and listen to a chapter. I don't even really want timestamps. That doesn't help me other than to cut stuff up, because the person's obviously waiting either to jaywalk or to go, or waiting for a COTA bus, smoking in the street. So yeah, it's been frustrating to me to listen to them. And then I did listen to them, and I started listening to a couple that I think are related, and because I asked that other friend about her collection of them, and she reminded me that I had a link of them and everything, so I started digging into that. And I listened to the first one, and it had some good information, and I enjoyed the content of it, but it was just not in a very concise or compressed form. It was just, quite honestly, it was the author of the book I'm reading, just leading the guy very gradually with these questions. And he said he really enjoyed the conversation, but to me he seemed annoyed, because every time he said anything, the guy was just like, uh-huh. It's just, so I'm trying to listen to these podcasts like it was suggested of me, and it's just there's not a lot of ore, right now for me in them. And I don't doubt, I'm not saying that the person who told me to listen to them is wrong, but like, I could really use some more specifics. I would like, I've got kind of a list of podcasts, but it'd be helpful to know, usually there are like 3 or 4 different callers in like a 2-hour show. It'd be helpful to like have some specific callers, like listen to caller number 1 in this podcast, caller number 2. And that's a thing too, is like I would imagine that one of the things that a person could say if I asked for such detailed information for something that they think is really would be really helpful to me is, well, like, sorry, I'm busy, I don't have time to go and make an index for you of all this kind of stuff. But that's also something that I kind of don't really understand, is that when I if I share something with someone, and I try and tell them initially exactly where the information they need is, and I try and give them an idea of how much time it's going to take them, I think. And then I also, if they come back to me with questions later, I try to answer them by at least directing them to like some place where I think might have the answer. But yeah, I try and be supportive of the things that, if I recommend something and then someone goes and dives in and takes interest in it, I try and be supportive as they're trying to make use of my information. Because once again, it's one more person in the world who's aware of this thing that I'm into. And especially, 99% of the time, it's stuff that it's a tool to help someone. So with me, it's been mostly technical things, but like, just last night I was sharing, I had a problem that I was trying to solve with technology, and I started digging into a new framework, and I ended up picking it up pretty quick and actually finishing what I was trying to accomplish, and I was pretty impressed by it. And so I just immediately started sharing it with people and saying, hey, please, you might want to take a look at this if you ever end up in a similar situation. Or and I told them exactly what it did and exactly how I used it, and now they know a point of contact if they dig into it and they try and use it that way. And also I made sure that my source code that I wrote is available to me wherever I am, so that if first of all, if I want to use it somewhere else, it's available to me. But then also, if someone else has a question, I should be able to dig in and review some of the things. I thought it was really nice. It was kind of a self-explanatory framework, so I consider that well documented. I could kind of figure out how things worked, but I also have some experience using similar frameworks and also the underlying technologies that it's built on top of. So I think that helped me a little bit as well. So anyway, I was trying to share this information, and then I was also a person was asking about something else. They said, hey, I'm thinking of doing an application, and it's like, I'm thinking of using this technology. What technologies would you use? And I said, well, for that I would consider using Xamarin, which is a cross-platform development technology, and I explained what I thought the benefits were, and I thought that there was really good documentation and help videos and stuff like that I'm also prepared to furnish. So pardon me, still getting over my cold. So like, I guess I'm just trying to share like my approach to sharing stuff is like, if someone says that they're having a problem, and then they tell me about some technology, and I tell them about some technology that I think will help them solve the problem. If they dig right in, I really appreciate that, so I understand that perspective. But also if they don't, it's like their problem, and I know I've given them the answer, and they might come back to me when they're ready. But I also understand that there are a lot of things going on in people's lives, and so they don't necessarily have time to drop everything and dig in on something. So yeah, I guess my take on it so far is, I've been enjoying the RTR book because it's very concise, and I guess the argument for the podcasts over the book is that at the time that the book came out, a lot of the people who were present for the podcasts gave a lot of backlash about how the book wasn't anything like the podcasts, or wasn't helpful in the same ways to people. And that may well be true, but one thing that we have to remember here is that, and this is something that the author Stefan Molyneux, he's mentioned in a couple of call-in shows that I've heard, is people have called in and said, hey, you don't know what you're doing, that was like a crappy book or whatever, or you don't know what you're talking about, allow me to tell you how to do it better. And then he's like, okay, shoot, tell me how to do it better. And the people, they can't tell him because they can't do it better, or else they would have done it better. And that's, and it's fine to go up to someone and like, if someone is learning to do something new and you're a master of it, it's one thing to go from a master to a student and say, hey, I notice you're making this mistake. But it's pretty often that the people are, and that's really how I view it in the situation of this book, is I'm very openly and honestly a student here. That's why I'm reading the book. I've listened to the audiobook once before and I thought it was interesting, but I didn't really recall a lot of it. So I'm trying to be more deliberate in my listening this time around. And so this relative master is advising me, like, don't waste your time with the book, and I understand that and I appreciate that, but at the same time it's like, sometimes it's not easy to see the mastery when you're the student, and sometimes you just have to push through things. And then also I like closure. I've been wanting to reread this book after listening to it one time. Now I have a group of people that I know have read the book, and so I can talk about it with them. And the number of people that's read the book, I think, is greater than the number of people that have listened to all these podcasts. So while they may end up helping me more, I definitely think that I'm going to continue to try to get a little bit more precise information so I can not waste so much time. I mean, I was listening to one today and it started out on the subject of real-time relationships, RTR kind of stuff, but it quickly got into a very interesting discussion about people using psychedelics and why that's bad compared to like just naturally dreaming or naturally being happy, through like going and seeing a therapist and working through what's making you unhappy about the world or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think that I got kind of off, it's really easy to get off track just with the podcast format, because they're always changing subjects and stuff, and it's all really interesting stuff. It's like digging into Wikipedia, and sometimes it's like Jerry Springer. So like, I think I put the podcast content into like a couple different categories. Is like, one is stuff that it's like really instructive and really helps me see the world differently and better and more effectively. And then there are other things that are more like just interesting conversations about how to have a thoughtful debate or a thoughtful discussion about something, and really how to make arguments and really analyze things from a logical and just a perspective that is not very common in everyday society. So I like to feed from that trough whenever I can. And then other episodes are like Jerry Springer stuff, where you end up with some just goofball who thinks that they don't even know how to. What was the thing I heard the other day? Someone was saying, I think it was in the book RTR, maybe. Steph was talking about it's not even a failure. It's not like the argument is so bad that it's not even a bad argument. It's just not an argument at all. It's I forget the exact term. He said it's a term used in science a lot to describe like theory. It's not a theory. It's not even a bad theory, like, or something like that. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting insight. And that's what I encounter so much. A lot of times people just have these, essentially just an emote on a subject. They don't I ask them why they think what they do. They don't seem to know. They don't really have any sources. They don't, it's not consistent with reality. If you cite some examples, they go, well, that's just anecdotal. It's like, well, yeah, but I mean, if you end up with enough anecdotal evidence, at some point it becomes a body of evidence. So anyway, yeah. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about this notion that I have to wrap it up here. This notion that, like, you can just kind of walk up to someone and say, you're learning about it wrong. You need to go and read this or consume this content, and then you will understand the world as I see it. And I haven't found that to be the way it works. And what I've found is that it's much better to just realize, like, what if you were the last person? Like, what if these podcasts didn't exist? What if they were destroyed? Like, what could someone say to me about the content in them to kind of summarize, or to maybe like how they could reproduce the most valuable parts of the content themselves? I realize it's not going to be the original. It's like if Steph's a big fan of Freddie Mercury and the Live Aid concert and stuff like this. Like, okay, like, what if all the recordings of that were destroyed? There still could be some value from attempting to reproduce it. I think one of the things people say is that it's the performance that matters, and I agree with something like the Live Aid performance. But when it comes to things that, about discussing ideas and processes and methodologies, while I admit that there's a lot in the delivery, I really think there's a lot of value. That's one of the reasons I vlog. I don't think that I'm the best person at conveying this information, but it's a way that I can go and I can share stuff that I think is interesting to me. And so one of the things that is interesting to me is just this concept of how common it is for people to just come up and say, like, if you do exactly what I did, you will be where I am. And that, it seems to almost never be the case. That isn't the case with success. The successes I have are not from lockstep mimicking and copying someone else. I think we all have to find success in our own ways, and we will find a lot of failures in the way that inform us uniquely. I think one of the reasons that I'm uniquely in a unique position to talk about political matters is I've run for office so many times with I think a strong core philosophy that is incompatible with the voting public, which that's the ironic thing about it, is like the very people that I think would have most benefited from voting for me while I was running for office are the very people who don't vote at all. And that's not a very successful combination. That's like trying to sell the best soft drink to people who don't buy soft drinks. It may be the best soft drink for people who don't buy soft drinks, but they're never going to know about it. So yeah. So anyway, I'm just trying to take the advice seriously, and I'm not giving up on it just because I've snagged a dud podcast. I mean, the first part obviously was relevant and applicable, and it was interesting, but I'm not sure that it's been more helpful to me than the book at this point. I will try and listen to more of these podcasts throughout the day and stuff like that, but I've just got a bunch of tasks to work on, just kind of a big huge pile that I have to work through, and takes a lot of focus, and it's a lot of troubleshooting type stuff. So it's not quite mindless stuff where you can kind of have something on have something on and be focusing on it while you're kind of just mindlessly hunting and pecking. It's something that you really have to be focusing on comprehending things properly and interacting with other people that maybe aren't communicating very well. You're asking them some question and they're saying, oh, just go read this manual. Just go learn this technology. I actually had a guy, we know we're going to be working on this new technology, and he said, or this was a couple months ago, he said, our team's going to rely heavily on this technology, and no one understands it. So I need you to go learn everything there is to know about it and become our subject matter expert. And it's like, what? Like, I don't even know. Like, to me, that is just a ludicrous proposition, that you can just assign someone to go and learn everything there is to know about a subject. And then, you know, and he literally said, my expectation is that if I have a question, I'll be able to come to you and you'll just know the answer off the top of your head. It's like, what the hell? It's like, that's not how my mind works. So you'll need to find someone else to do that. I mean, there might be things that I've learned a lot about, and I'm happy to share them, but like, I don't go and just learn everything about something in case someone else has a question later. And you know why? It's because here we are like 6 months later, and we're not even using the technology that I was supposed to go and dedicate, well, apparently my personal life, to learning about it, because they certainly didn't give me any time to learn about it at work, really. So yeah, it's I've got my own stuff to learn about at home, so I don't really have time for homework. Sometimes it overlaps, like the stuff that I was learning over the weekend, it could be helpful here at work. But yeah, I mean, I know what I know, and I learn what I want to learn, and I'm not really interested in learning a bunch of stuff I don't want to learn unless you're paying me to do it. So if you want to pay me to do it, I mean, that's what I do all day, is I get paid to learn shit that I'd rather not deal with, because there's a need, and I'm supposedly helping save the day. So that's fine. I understand that. The world needs people who are willing to do that. But when I go home, I'm going to spend my time learning what I want to learn. And if there's a disconnect there, I mean, that's how I've had every job that I've had, is that I went and I learned what I wanted to do in my spare time, and then got a job doing that, and in favor of a job that wanted me to do a bunch of stuff that I didn't want to do. It's like I worked at a place where, and I'm still very pessimistic about this being a wise choice, but I worked at a place that we were a Microsoft shop. We used Microsoft tools and Microsoft languages generally, and then an edict came down from the home office overseas that we would be switching to use something that is Java based instead, which was similar but different and not what people knew. And the other developers, they didn't really seem to care. They didn't really have an opinion, but I did, and so they just kind of just switched over happily, and it helped that I'm actually a fan of Microsoft stuff. I like their philosophy, and I like the support that they provide and stuff like that. It's an ecosystem that I'm comfortable with, and so I'm not really looking to change that at this point in my career, unless there's a really pertinent reason to. And I am learning lots of other technologies and add-ons and stuff too, but I like it to be tangential to the Microsoft stack. And so anyway, this company just came and said, oh yeah, you're all switching to this, and the other people, they didn't particularly like Microsoft stuff, so they didn't really care what they were using. But they also, they're not the greatest developers I've ever known. I mean, I've never seen anything of them since. They're still working for the same company, maintaining the same crap code they wrote probably back when I was working with them. So it's like, or being a manager of people who are charged with maintaining that same code. So yeah, I don't know. I just I think it's really unwise to just go and kind of dictate that everyone just change. It's like, I mean, you wouldn't go into a workplace and just say, hey, we've decided. I mean, you could do that, I guess, in a machine shop. Like, let's say you got bought by a European company and they wanted everything to be compatible with their European product line, and they're like, hey everyone, we're switching from imperial to metric. So you guys have been machinists in the imperial system your whole career. We're switching to metric, so start machining in that instead. I imagine that would ultimately be okay, but it would probably, there'd be a learning curve, because a lot of tricks that tradespeople use, they seem to be based, they're tricks that work in one system or another, and so they'd probably have to learn them. So yeah, I just don't think it's a good idea to just swap things out like that all the time. But anyway, yeah, it just goes back to this whole, like, don't be vague. Don't just sit there and say, you know, you need to look at this and then you'll be enlightened or whatever. I mean, if you know what you're talking about, give some hints, help out a little bit, and I think that sometimes when you're a master at something and a student asks you to do that, sometimes you can be a little taken back from it, because you may have the perception, well, yeah, that's what I've been doing, and you're not getting it. Because I've been an instructor of things before, and I know that feeling, but that's kind of the duty of the instructor, to kind of overcome some of those communications difficulties, and that's what furthers mastery. So anyway, I got to go in and get started working on stuff. So that's it, and I hope, I don't know, I think it was more just kind of talking to myself, but today, but I feel like sometimes I want to talk about these subjects and get the ideas out there, and I kind of feel like they'll come off in a more organized way than they will, but I hope there's like some understanding, and I hope that I've really hit on the core topics about how, like, I think it's a bad habit of people to just kind of go and point people in the direction of stuff and then just drop it, or get irritated if they don't just drop everything and go dig into something that's time consuming and not well defined. It's really, I think if we want people to come along quickly, we need to kind of hold their hand a little bit and show them like the relevant bits, and help match them up with what is going to help them most. I think that's the most productive. And you know what? It's not your job to do that, but I just think we'll all live in a better world the more we help people along. And that's one of the reasons that I share information about technologies that I know with people who are non-technical, and try and get them excited about it and stuff like that, is I think it makes life better for me. I know when it comes to some of my friends that I talk to, helping them through their issues with things like Skype and OneNote and stuff, that certainly makes it easier for me if I want to use those tools with them. And sometimes I have trouble with the tools as well. So, but anyway, that's it for me. So I'm going to call it a wrap. And if you think this is helpful, or it would be helpful to someone else, please share it with them. I know it's kind of a long format. I'd like to do some short format stuff, but just trying to fit it in when I have time during my commutes. So I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.